Buckley Smith, and you're listening to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. This week, we have another listener crit for you. I'm back with Cameron to talk about two listener-submitted poems. Very different poems, but I think they illuminate each other quite nicely. So I'm glad we paired them. For those of you waiting to hear if it's going to be your poem this week, because we've gotten a couple more, so we're building back up our backlog, but I'm going to keep plowing ahead. The poems we're discussing this week are The Hotel Barth by M and an untitled poem by J. The beginning of that poem is, I don't know, hope resembles habit. I also wanted to recommend, that came up briefly, and I meant to recommend it before, an essay called Let Rhyme Take Control by a listener subscriber, Alex McCune, on Substack. He talks about he quotes me seemingly insulting him as the epigraph to the essay. But it's a smart essay elaborating on this question of whether it's rhyme guiding the poem or argument or something else. So worth taking a look. Very, very clear and entertaining essay. Also, I feel like I'm a broken record, but Alice just has like yet another thoroughly delicious, deeply gratifying essay about failing to make friends that I'll link to. I don't know if she has a schedule for her posts, but man, the second they drop, I am eager to read them in future posts. And the latest one is no disappointment. Cameron and I, after we talked about the listener poems, we then had, I think, a pretty provocative conversation about morality in the life of a poet. We talked specifically a little bit about an essay that was in the London Review of Books like 20 years ago about a Chinese poet named Gu Chang. And Ethan had some, who of course does also translate Chinese himself, had some very helpful notes that he wrote in about some things that Elliot Weinberger, who wrote this essay, got wrong. So the essay is called Next Stop Forbidden City, if you want to read it. We don't get too much into that essay. We are speaking slightly more broadly about what exactly is the writer's code of ethics or lack of code of ethics. And I suspect we may be answering that question in a completely unhelpful way and not at all the way you think. Like, I can immediately think of some really practical answers to that question that we did not even get within a mile of. But I did really enjoy our conversation, and I think you may as well. That will be on The Secret Show. You can find it at sleerickets.substack.com. I will repeat my little spiel about that at the end, but go check it out if you have not yet. The Secret Show is well worth listening to. A lot of really juicy stuff there. sleerickets.substack.com. It also helps us keep the lights on and the books flowing. All right, here is my conversation with Cameron about The Hotel Barth by M and Untitled by J. The other thing I realized, because there's a little note in this first poem where the poet, it's not a guzzle, but he pulls a sort of a guzzle-like move where he refers to his own name in the poem. And I thought, because that's just a single syllable, we could just use M for that.
In the hotel bath.
In the hotel bath. And then I have a different letter right now, but I figured I would just switch the author initial to M for the hotel bath.
Yeah.
And then I may just read M in that line. It feels like a guzzle, because I was going to say, you don't see that so often outside of guzzles where the poet addresses himself.
Yeah.
I will also add that this, without giving any other personal information, this is the author of this poem is I can't probably say that he's a good chess player, but I can say that he's better than me. So I've definitely played him and been beaten badly more than once. So I definitely have some respect for his game. Yeah, let's just jump into The Hotel Barth. And I'm saying Barth because it looks like John Barth's name, but when I looked it up, there's a hotel in Colorado called Hotel Barth, and there's another one in Germany, which I guess there would be pronounced Bart.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Oh,
Barth.
I think that's important to a rhyme effect at the end of the poem, so that's good to know.
Yeah, though that rhyme is a recurring slant throughout, so it's
Yeah.
hard to say exactly. But yeah, that would be at least closer to a true rhyme with some of the
Hmm.
words that appear here. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll read this through. The Hotel Barth by M. Walking forth and back from work, I daily pass the Hotel Barth. Old winos sit with vacant stares, wrapped in coats and hats and scarves, their faces marred, their livers scarred. They mumble words which no one hears, then turn and shuffle up the stairs. The smell of piss and smoke and farts is sharp around the Hotel Barth. And life's a farce. It isn't fair. Or is it? That thought is scary, as if their lives serve as a warning. M, beware. You know it's there. Inside your heart, depraved and dark, that urge to smoke, chase chicks in bars, get blackout drunk, then drive your car, inject some drugs into your arm. One little slip, that's how it starts. You'll wind up at the Hotel Barth. And alternatively, I guess you could read that as one little slip, that's how it starts. You'll wind up at the Hotel Bart.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
sharper and closer to a true rhyme there.
I want to preface
Yeah,
my
yeah.
comments on this poem by saying I think it's going to seem like I have a lot of criticisms of this poem. So I just wanted to say that just in terms of praise, I think
Yeah.
I think the poet has done a very good job of producing a conceptual, argumentative structure
Yeah.
in the poem. It's very clear, it's very concise. The movement of the argument, the sort of, I guess the turn is very well done. Everything I think is very well weighed. So I think as a structure overall, this succeeds. It's pretty well realized. I just think in terms of its language, and obviously we can get into this
Yeah, yeah.
quite intensely, but I think in terms of its language, it still requires a lot of various changes to its construction. But yeah, as an overall product, I think this has a very clear understanding of what it wants to be and is basically being that thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also, I was going to say, like, as a moral argument that seems almost to relish what it's condemning as much as it condemns it, in this,
Right, right.
is this sort of catalog of urban squalor. It's very Baudelairean. It's
Yeah,
very much his style of poem, down to the pit, piss and smoke and farts. Um,
yeah.
that's his sort of line. Yeah. So just looking at it formally, it's written in tetrameter,
Uh-huh.
iambic tetrameter. There's the first line's headless, walking forth and back from work. Um, and the lines are the meter's pretty regular. There's some headless lines. There's a little bit of variation. There's some modulation, but not a whole lot of variation. And then two lines landed oddly in my ear, and those two lines were, "Or is it that thought is scary?"
Yes.
And so I read that as a three-beat line, and we have
Yeah.
the same number of syllables as like an eight, it's 8 syllables, right? Because you have two unstressed syllables in a row. Or is it that thought is scary? And then you have a feminine foot at the end. You only have 3 beats. And then the next line, as if their lives serve as a warning. That's not a major variation, but I think because you invert the third foot, as if their lives serve as, right, trochee. Because if it were perfect iambic tetrameter, it would be as if their lives serve as, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think that you invert the third foot, and then the fourth foot is a feminine foot. We have serve as a warning, right? It gives it almost like an Adonic feel, like the end of a Sapphic stanza there. So
For
it just
sure.
threw my ear off slightly. This isn't nothing. None of this is fatal, but I just noted those were sort of the only places where the meter felt wobbly. Otherwise, it's quite regular and sometimes even arguably too regular.
Yeah,
Um,
I think also sort of with relation to the meter, I think serve is in many ways a kind of the linchpin on which the poem turns. So I think the commentary on lives basically serving as a moral instruction or a representation of decay and whatever, or sinfulness, or however you want to sort of describe it in whichever religiosity. Serve here is a very important word, and because it's such an important word, you're basically going to have to place the stress on serve,
yeah, yeah,
because the conceptual stress is on serve.
yeah, yeah.
So that
And I
line,
think,
I
yeah,
think,
for it to pull you up
yeah.
short slightly may be appropriate. It might register more pointedly if it were not preceded by a line where the meter was so off.
Yeah, well,
Um,
for
yeah.
sure, yeah.
Although I will say that in a way, the most those three lines are maybe the most interesting in terms of the argument in the poem.
Oh, for
Life's a
sure. Oh,
farce; it isn't
definitely.
fair, or is it? Right? Like maybe life is fair. Like we're looking at all the squalor and suffering and awfulness and bad behavior and poverty. Life's a farce; it isn't fair, or maybe it is fair. Maybe they deserve this. It's a startling thought. I mean, it reminds me again. It's very Baudelairean. Like beat up the poor.
Oh, no, no, those
Yeah,
those lines make a pretty bland poem into a good poem, in
yeah,
my
yeah, yeah, yeah. That thought is
yeah.
scary, as if their lives serve as a warning. I think that the as and then as in that construction is clumsy, and the meter in those two lines I have a little bit of trouble getting through. But suddenly taking this sort of this harsh moral assessment of all of the squalor that the poem's been looking at is really fascinating, and then it's made more convincing by the fact that the next line the poet addresses himself.
Oh, for sure.
That
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
not looking down his nose at them. He's saying, like, "Oh, this is I'm on the hook for this as well."
Oh,
Which to me
no,
is, yeah, yeah.
the
Sorry, go
the
ahead.
progression is very good. I think is
Yeah,
perfectly what, not that we expect, but what we want, what should happen. I do wonder if, given how important it is, whether serve should serve some kind of rhyme function in the poem. I do wonder if, like, its position in the middle of a line is maybe not helping it, or not quite giving it the gravitas that I think it deserves. I wonder if you had to put serve into the rhyme scheme, I wonder what that would do. So
yeah,
that's like a slightly idle thought, but
yeah, yeah.
you
It
know,
also, I mean, it also suggests the potential rhyme word deserve,
exactly. Yeah,
right? Which
yeah,
seems
yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah.
at least relevant thematically to that moment. Although, as I meant to recommend it before, but Alex McKeown has a good essay elaborating on the question of rhyme guiding a poem or meaning guiding a poem, and we should always be wary of too readily accepting a rhyme word that serves our argument. But yeah, that does come to
Indeed.
mind there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah,
look at, if I don't know, imagine if you put serve at the end of the line and then you rhymed it on a half rhyme level with depraved. I think
yeah, yeah,
that would be such an interesting conceptual movement. Um, but yeah, I mean, I have a lot of line by line comments, so I'm like, I want,
yeah,
at some
yeah.
point I want to go through the poem line by line.
Yes,
But
yeah. Well, so yeah, so let's do that first. Though I just wanted to say, if that was my thought on the meter. Those two lines, it sounded a little funny. Otherwise, it's quite regular. And then the rhyme is odd.
mm,
So marking it, I initially was sort of marking it A B C B B C C B B C C D. So it's a lot of B sound and a lot of C sound, but it's pretty irregular. And then the last six lines are all B. And when I say that these letters, I mean within a range, right? Because they're
right.
almost all slant rhymes. So the B rhyme sound is Barth, scarves, scarred, farts, dark, bars, car, right? And then the
Yeah, yeah.
C rhyme sound is stairs, stairs, again, a different word, same sound. Fair, scary. Hears seemed in that context to be a slant rhyme for stairs.
Uh-huh.
There are a couple other words, work and warning, that don't seem to rhyme with anything. And again, the at least as I was able to decipher it, the scheme, there's a couple of BBCC, BBCC in a, there's that pattern there leading up to the middle of the poem, but otherwise it doesn't seem to have much of a scheme to it. And there, as I said, they're very, very slant throughout. There's also rhyme, internal rhyme. So their face is marred, their liver scarred. The smell of piss and smoke and farts is sharp around the hotel barth, and life's a farce. It isn't fair.
Right.
And I think that there's so much internal rhyme at places, particularly when it begins to be, what is the term? Is it whole rhyme? That's where you actually repeat the initial sound as well as the stressed and the succeeding sound, the terminal sound.
Oh fuck.
Stairs and stairs, or like Wilbur has that poem that rhymes. It ends by rhyming trees with geometries.
It's not identity rhyme, is it?
Identity rhyme. I mean, that's when it's the same word, though, right?
Yeah.
There's some term for when you're. It's technically not true rhyme, right? Because true rhyme involves a different initial sound.
Right. Yeah.
But I think what began to happen I think a couple things happened. One is their face is marred, their liver scarred. That kind of construction where you see it's not just that there's an additional rhyme within the line, but that the construction is perfectly parallel. I think that's a place where we start to feel the conscious effort of the poet in rhyming, right? This is where, like, part of the pleasure of rhyme is that it feels slightly against the grain of the denotation, right? It's a little bit surprising. That's why we often try to rhyme across parts of speech, across sentence structures. And so when the sentence structure becomes parallel along with the rhyme, it can begin to feel contrived. Similarly, I think
interesting.
So many rhymes within internal rhymes. The smell of piss and smoke and farts is sharp around the hotel barth. What that called to my mind was Dr. Seuss. Right?
Yeah,
it starts to sound comical in a way that, again, whether that's intended or not, that's the effect it has. And then, my feeling is like, I'll tell you what effect it has, and you can decide whether you want it to have that effect.
Right? Okay, let me be slightly annoying.
Yeah.
Proceeding backward, I agree with the farts, bath, sharp rhyme. I think that's over intense to the point of just comicalness and sort of a charm that's like Zeus and isn't particularly interesting. So let me read out just to demonstrate my own enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read out these lines. Wrapped in coats and hats and scarves, their faces marred, their livers scarred, they mumble words which no one hears. They turn and shuffle up the stairs. So what I really like about that is that I agree, like the marred, scarred rhyme, along with like following the perfect logic of the syntax. I think if you left that on its own, I'd agree with your critique.
Mm-hmm.
But given that it's a sort of an immediate summation, like a perfect rhyme in the middle of these 5 lines that end with scarves, and then you have the scarred marred line, and then hears, and then stares. There's like a fascinating movement of half rhymes from scarves to hears to stares that are all not perfect rhymes, but are clearly, following a pattern, a kind of inevitable closening of syntax, closening of sound. And I think in the middle of that operation, the kind of perfect rhyme, the perfect parallelism of their bodies all being damaged in the exact way, which is obviously sort of created representatively in the marred, scarred rhyme. I don't know, to me, that has a kind of authority that is given to it not just by having perfect rhymes, but by having perfect rhymes in the middle of this progression of damaged rhymes that seems kind of, I don't know, conceptually perfectly mimetic to the people it's describing. They're both uniform and broken, or not quite, corresponding to each other as the end of line rhymes work. And yet they are perfectly paralleled as those two internal rhymes work. So like, yeah, I totally see your point, but here it does kind of feel like a kind of perfect linguistic expression of what it's describing. So I quite like it.
Yeah, I do think they mumble words which no one hears. They then turn and shuffle up the stairs. Could almost be out of like Eliot's Preludes.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I do
that's very,
wonder. I do
very
wonder.
Eliot.
Just in terms of precision, they mumble words which no one hears. I want to say that it may not matter one way or the other, but just in terms of precise observation, probably what's meant there is which no one understands.
Yeah.
That they're not inaudible. They're unintelligible. Words. But it's
Yes.
like, which maybe kind of like that Walcott line where he calls them silent knives when he means invisible knives.
One could argue maybe that they don't hear each other because they're so fucked up on various things that, like, they're inaudible to each other and no one else hears them because they're mumbling.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
maybe,
it also suggests like prayers that are going.
but yeah.
I think what you're identifying are sort of these little moments where there's a potential really fine effect in the
Yeah.
language, and I think my overall note is that there are a number of such moments, and just as with the trochaic inversion in the line as if their lives serve as a warning, the potentially fine verbal effect is a little bit drowned out by so much clamoring repetitive half rhyme.
Yeah, that
I think
seems
because the whole poem keeps hammering this r, then the little moments where there's something subtle and nice happening are harder to. It's harder for those moments to reach us.
yeah, that seems true. No, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the advantage you have is that you have constructed a clear argument. The disadvantage is that in doing so, you call your shot.
Yeah.
Right? Which means you let us all know what you're going for. You also have the disadvantage of reminding us of other times people have done something similar. And so the two examples that came to mind were the Hotel California and the House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah.
Right? Both songs about people, where a place is used as an analogous object, to stand in for addiction or a state of life or a condition. And this seems to be similar to what is happening here, even if it's not exactly what's happening here. The prominence and familiarity of those figures, I think, will be hard entirely to avoid.
Oh, for sure. And I think also Eliot in Prof Rock and in the Sweeney poems, I think definitely comes through here.
Yeah. I mean, though, yeah, it's funny because it's almost like Proof Rock's more fun friend, right?
Yeah.
Because Proof Rock would be similarly scandalized by all this, but he would be fantasizing about, like, would it be interesting if I could be one of those men? Whereas this guy knows he could be one of these men,
right,
and is afraid of how easy it would be to go that way.
Yeah, I think also the Sweeney poems, where there's more pleasure and less more immediate moral surface or unease. But no, I definitely see it, because I think in content it's closer to something by Larkin, but I think in music and form it's closer to something in early Eliot.
Kind of like Larkin's Toad poems, where he's like, look at those, their appalling wives. What is the line he has for their unspeakable wives? Is that lots of folk live up lanes with fires in a bucket, eating windfalls and tin sardines. They seem to like it. Their nippers have got bare feet. Their unspeakable wives are skinny as whippets. So there's definitely a little bit of that.
I was going to say, just on that matter, I do think maybe as a useful corrective, I really dislike Larkin, but Larkin can use a kind of prosaicness in his lines, in his metric, that can, I think, rescue a poem from sounding too overly rhyming or too overly Eliotic. And I think here may be useful if, like, suddenly some lines explode into something vaguely prosaic. I think that may, like, temper the intensity of all the sound, which I do agree with you, I think is overproduced here.
Yeah, there is something high. It's not even necessarily a high register or tone, but there's something slightly highfalutin about this voice. And
Yeah,
that
yeah,
part of what I think sets that tone is just the slight inversion. I daily pass the hotel Barth right at
yeah,
the very
for sure.
beginning. Just sets us in a frame of mind to hear things poetically, to be thinking poetically. And then I think that there is such an insistent rhyme. Yeah, and I think that combined with the moral argument
Mm,
puts us in an odd place where it feels like even though the poem is unafraid of acknowledging harsh realities, it almost feels clumsy when it does so. That farts feel slightly out of place, and definitely chicks in bars felt very odd to my ear.
yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah. I mean, I
at
have other comments
the
like
moment.
this, but
So
yeah,
yeah, it felt like there's a little bit of trouble the poem has in just identifying where the voice of this speaker is. And that is something that Larkin is very, very good at. That whether you
yes,
like him, whether you think he's too bleak, whether you think he's too misanthropic or not pretty enough or whatever, his voice is extremely credible.
for sure.
And this
Oh, yeah.
voice feels a little uncertain of where it wants to rest.
Okay, well, let me. I mean, obviously, you can say whatever you
Yeah,
want,
yeah,
but
please.
let's go line by line because I
Yeah.
think I have a lot of things that basically
Mhm.
relate to this. So, looking at line one, walking forth and back from work, I think this line immediately
Yep.
is problematic because forth is such a poetic word, on the edge of being archaic. Walking forth and back from work immediately constructs this kind of syntactic juxtaposition between, like, the mundane, the modern, walking, to and from work, and this kind of poetic forth. Also, I'm pretty sure that logically one would say walking back and forth from work. I don't, maybe that's just me,
Well,
but walking.
you walk to work and then you walk back from work.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
this is it's written in the order in which you'd experience it, but the expression is back and forth.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
it's a stamp, it's a received phrase. And if you don't want to use a received phrase in your poem, I can understand trying to disrupt it, but the problem here is you've just inverted it in a way that sounds very alien. It sounds like nothing anybody would say,
Oh,
and
for sure.
it's still basically the same received phrase, just backwards.
I
So it
also
just
don't.
sounds clumsy to my ear.
I don't think you need to discount using a received phrase at all at this point.
No, no, no.
It's just,
I'm not saying you need to discount it, but it
oh,
feels
oh,
to me
yeah, yeah,
like he's
yeah.
almost apologizing for using it here.
Oh no, I agree with you. I'm just talking specifically to him. I
Yeah, yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
that he requires a received phrase on the level, on the colloquial level that the rest
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
poem operates at. And this, I think, immediately sounds both highfalutin and out of its place.
Yeah,
It sounds immediately at war with itself. And I think I daily pass the hotel bath. I,
yeah.
it's not just that daily pass sounds archaic. It's
It
maybe
also sounds like something you'd get for the subway, right? A daily
right.
pass. Yeah,
Yeah, the daily pass.
yeah,
£2. It's a great deal.
yeah,
But yeah, no, like it's not just that it sounds archaic. It's on the edge of being redundant. If you're
yeah,
walking back and from work,
right.
most readers are going to assume that that's a pretty regular pattern, if not every
Yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah.
So
It's
daily
enough
pass,
days that it might as well be. Yeah,
exactly. So daily pass is just it's unrequired and it's just odd. No one says I daily pass the hotel bath.
yeah, yeah.
That's it's odd. Um, Old winos sit with vacant stares. Yeah, I don't. Winos maybe dates the language of the poem slightly, but then again, everything's going to date
Yeah.
the language of the poem eventually.
Yeah,
So
it's also. I
why
mean,
it works for me.
my slight. I mean, I think it's fine basically. But like my slight qualm is that it's an assessment, not a description.
It's a cliche, also. I mean, vacant
Yeah, yeah,
stares is
yeah.
it's
Vacant
a
stares
hollow phrase.
is a yeah received phrase. Wrapped in coats and hats and scarves. To me, when I hear that wrapped in coats and hats and scarves, it's little, but it feels like I can feel somebody filling out the meter
Yeah,
with a
yeah, yeah.
pulse and a
I
tone.
assume. Yeah, I see what you
Yeah.
mean. I think also if it wasn't preceded by such an if not expected, then a very understood phrase.
Mm.
I could imagine them using a description of their vacant stares that's original, and then following with wrapped in coats and hats and scarves. And I think the
Yeah.
originality of the previous phrase would maybe make the next line seem less metrically padded. But as it stands, I think it's just too expected. It's going through the motions without particular uniqueness or, originality of vision. Because without uniqueness, you're not really making us feel like we are there. You're making us feel like we're in the simulacra of everything that cliches are. And that is the basic, I think, critique of cliches.
My annoying elaboration on the now deeply unfashionable writing advice show don't tell is evoke, don't explain.
Oh,
And
for
this
sure.
feels like it's doing both. There's some good evocation here, but there's also some explanation that I think
Is that unfashionable now? Would people not like that? Show don't
saying show
tell.
don't tell
Yeah.
is unfashionable. Yeah,
Really?
it's supposed to. Yeah, I mean, I think
Wow.
again, it's
No
I
one
think it's a
told me.
helpful thing to learn, and like any simple rule, it's to be applied sometimes. Right?
It
You
seems
know?
pretty useful to begin with. Oh,
Yeah,
for
yeah, I
sure.
think it's very
Like,
useful to begin with, and it's responding to what most beginning writers tend
exactly.
to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
but I
that's
think
what.
for the most, like there's a lot of evocation here. I mean, I do think like I've referred to it before, but there's part of me that it's not that every poem needs to work purely at the level of sensation. I think that's also like sometimes writing teachers get too precious about like give us food for all five senses and let us experience. I think this can become a little precious, but I
Uh-huh.
do think that it's notable that if you say their face is marred, their liver's scarred, there's sort of two assessments happening there. You're not showing us their faces. You're telling us that they're made worse in some way. But then I think more significantly, you're telling us that their livers are scarred. What that I mean, I think like in this context, what that tells me is I'm not yet sure if we are dealing with a dramatic monologue, right?
Yeah.
Because you clearly don't know that, but it's a reasonable guess. And is this the poet showing us what the speaker is thinking as he's passing these people, which is also for him a reflection of some guilt and some sense of I could have done some damage to my liver already. This could be some of what's happening to me. But it just anytime you say something like that, you're not actually merely describing what you know from what you're experiencing. It's worth drawing attention to it, not because you need to change it, but because I think if you're going to do that, you want to do it on purpose, or at least you want to know that you're doing it.
Oh, for sure.
So that
No,
you're showing us this, what you're really showing us when you say something like that is not the state of the wino's livers. You're showing us the state of the speaker's mind.
oh, yes. And I also think that like the problem here is that like there's an imagistic uncertainty. Like the speaker is half the time wanting to sort of paint a picture of these winos with vacant stares. And their face is marred, right? It's almost on the edge of image. It's completely unspecific, but it's evoking a kind of common trope. But then their liver's scarred is basically, as you say, it's a sociological assumption
Yeah,
because otherwise it's just a bizarre change in vision from an external, basically normal
yeah,
human
yeah,
perspective to a sudden crazy sort of X-ray insight
yeah,
onto
yeah, yeah.
these winos' organs, right? So
Right.
like it's like a mixture of half formed, half specific imagism with a kind of vague common trope. And I think the kind of uncertainty over how specific it wants to be and the
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
changes in perspective that creates in the language is basically kind of fucking up what should be a pretty crystalline image.
Yeah, which again is can be a really smart move if again the what you're really giving us is a glimpse into the speaker. This is like the we're not going to talk about the Odyssey today, and we're not going to talk about Bronze Age pervert
Uh-huh.
either. But I just wanted to mention like the one little funny note, and I think it was an essay with I haven't finished reading it. It's incredibly fucking long. There is some really smart observation in it, and we'll get to another time, another day. But the funny little moment in that where he misidentifies the scars on Lupita Nyong'o's face, saying that they're ritual tribal scarification. And
Uh-huh, yeah.
he sort of refers to like or the rolling eyes of a witch doctor with ritual scarification. Of course, if
Sorry,
you
just when you say he, you mean the commentator on the
Bronze
Odyssey.
Age
Yeah.
pervert,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So,
Mm.
but my point is just that like that's an interesting moment because of course what he's actually showing us is not anything that's happening on screen, because that's not what her scars are. She got them from being beaten up probably by her husband. She's
Yeah.
not a witch doctor. She's not tribally scarred. None of that's true. What's actually being revealed to us is he thinks he's describing this woman. He's actually revealing himself. And
Yeah.
in that case, it's unintentional and he's a racist. but in this case, I think I'm not sure yet whether this is something the poet's doing. Again, if it works and it's cool, it doesn't really matter if you intended it. But I think it's worth just sort of being aware that that's a moment where you're no longer giving us a description. You're showing us what is happening in the mind of the speaker.
And I also think for how the poem goes on, the reader basically needs to trust the speaker, or at least trust they have a pretty good ability to pick out specific things that make an objective statement about people, because the poem then turns to how these people serve to, instruct morally about how life could go wrong, right? The problem then is that we have to believe in the speaker's vision for the poem to make that turn. And therefore, the lapses between specificity and cliche in these lines cause us to try and wonder whether, the speaker's vision is to be questioned or whether it's a good depiction of these people. And that is not what the logic of the poem demands. The logic of the poem demands that we trust the speaker's vision.
That's true. I was thinking about My Last Duchess because I was talking about that book review the other day, and part of what is interesting about My Last Duchess is, and it was true of any dramatic monologue, especially one with a conventionally unreliable narrator, is that the reader has a different perspective on things than the speaker does, and the poet probably has a different perspective than the speaker does, but not necessarily the whole time. So in most poems, there's an interesting moment where your perspective diverges from the speaker's.
Right.
And that can be a great moment of revelation in a poem. But I think here, because you do have this interesting turn from life's a farce, it isn't fair, which that's a moment where it feels almost like the pat received constructions that you're using there are appropriate, because they are sort of like the character, the speaker is resorting to cliched patterns of thought and saying, well, life's a farce. Hey, life isn't fair. Before then having that volta and saying, oh, actually, what if life is fair? That's the scariest thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you're right that we want for that moment, for that volta to have its full effect, you want the reader still to be completely on your side at that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you may not want to tip your hand before then that the speaker's point of view is already not necessarily suspect, but is freighted with his own history and his own expectations beyond what he's observing.
And you want, for the effectiveness of that turn, you want the reader basically to go with the speaker, right? It's like a roller coaster. You want the reader to move very smoothly along one path. So when, the ride jerks you down or in a different direction, the reader experiences that change instead of sort of, standing outside of it and feeling unaffected because they never trusted it to begin with.
Yeah. We talked about that line, or is it that thought is scary? I just think that the meter there is so clumsy that I think it's
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also clumsy because syntactically, right? So I'm just getting to that line. I'm just saying if old winos, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just looking to see if I have any other inline critiques, but I don't think so. Yeah. The smell of piss and farts is shut. Yeah, I agree that the hotel bath, too much rhyme. And life's a farce. It isn't fair. Or is it? That Ford is scary. Yeah, I think the entire weight of the syntax and the question is going against the meter, right? Like, are we supposed to say, or is it? That Ford is scary. It's not particularly smooth moving. And I think what you want an abrupt jerk to the stop with, or is it? That's an interruption of thinking. That's a change. But I don't think it's accomplished here very well with the kind of metrically ambiguous position of it in the line.
And then, as if their lives serve as a warning. I mean, yeah, there is something terrifying about the idea that somebody's entire life is just a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
I do think that the way that line is constructed with the double as if their lives serve as a warning, I think that's a little clumsy. Yeah, and then I guess, like, yeah, then we do get the turn from their lives to maybe our life, maybe our lives, maybe my life. Beware, you know it's there. I think, again, the rhymes are too close together. I also think, like, it if I were to, like, if you had written this poem in lines that averaged 4 beats, but
Uh-huh.
kind of really extended a good ways on either end of that average, what I might say to you is, like, see what it's like if it's strict tetrameter. See what it's like if you keep it actually to a clean tetrameter. You might be surprised how that tightens up the thought a little bit. And I think similarly, my inclination is to say, what if you just go with, like ABAB quatrains, or
Yeah.
or even couplets, but, like, tetrameter couplets are real tight, right? That's My Last
Oh,
Duchess,
for
right?
sure. Yeah.
Like, real
I
tight.
think pentameter couplets. I think that's
Uh,
Duchess hanging on the wall. I call
no,
them.
no.
Is it tetrameter?
I'm sorry. Did I say My Last Duchess? I meant to his coy mistress. To his coy
Oh
mistress.
yeah. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
tetrameter.
tetrameter couplets. Yeah, and it's real tight, and
Yeah.
it tends to be tart and funny, where it works best when it's got a little edge of humor to it. So, I mean, my inclination is ABAB or something like this,
Oh
or
no.
even
Yeah.
like ABXB. But I just think, as it is, where the rhymes sort of never stop ever and keep piling up, it feels skeletonic, particularly, I think, because they're so slant, and they're slant generally in an assonant fashion, which is what one associates with like pop music or folk rhyme,
Oh, for sure.
versus assonant, versus
Vowel rhymes. Sorry,
consonant rhyme.
consonantal
Yeah, yeah,
rhymes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think, like, yeah, given the sharpness of the meter and some of the argument, my inclination is, like, try cleaning up the rhyme scheme and see if that helps your thought a little bit.
I mean, also the argument of the poem ultimately is about inevitability. If some lives
Yeah,
serve as warnings to others, then those lives are inevitable, right? And like dark,
yeah,
dark things that have to happen. And couplets, they are, I guess, they are inevitable in a sense, but they're not really inevitable. They're kind of dance move. They're a perfect continuous fruition. Something like ABAB is
yeah,
inevitable
yeah,
because it's moving in this kind of lockstep of pattern.
yeah.
I don't know if per se you need to write the poem perfectly in AB and AB.
Mm.
I do wonder if you need to have a change in the rhyme scheme at serve, if like something more fluid suddenly has to kind of lock into the place that an ABAB quatrain would fulfill. But I think I'm more mimetic when it comes to subject than you. So that's my thinking.
And this is, hold on a minute, it's 19 lines. Yeah, I wonder if a little regularity in that scheme might start to. I mean, again,
Mm.
I think it's not true, but I am reminded of the of the sometime truth of A. Stallings' argument that she I think says, most problems in content are actually problems in form.
Oh yeah, well yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think it's not always true, but it is true more than maybe we would like it to be. I do think that in a way, there's in the turn to looking inward, inside your heart depraved and dark. To me, that feels almost like a similar kind of deflection, where what it reminds me of is like my move in high school or college, which is like, you should want to break up with me because I'm just no good for you. I'm a bad guy. Like that sort
Mm.
of, like, where what you're really doing is you are avoiding real introspection by claiming the worst possible adjectives, and applying them to yourself.
Oh,
we're like
oh,
this is like a classic, like, addict apology, right?
yeah.
I just fucked up. I got really blown out last night, and I was off the wall, and I was really out of control. And now today, instead of saying, like, yeah, I think I need to work on my drinking, and I think I maybe need some help with that, it's, oh, I'm worse than Hitler. I'm the worst man who's ever lived. None of you should ever have anything to do with me. I'm just a piece of shit, right? Like, I think
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
almost like it actually isn't real introspection.
Yeah.
And I think
No,
with
I
that
agree.
inside your heart depraved and dark, you're like, well, you're sort of owning up in such a way that doesn't require you actually to own up. And I appreciate the swift escalation from like the urge to smoke, chase chicks in bars, get blackout drunk, then drive your car, inject some drugs into your arms. It escalates very rapidly. I appreciate that escalation, but it does feel even there somehow distant, or not,
Yeah,
like
okay.
it doesn't feel as much like an immediate, intimate culpability.
Yeah. So, I mean, a few things, I think. Just going back to depraved and dark, if you're going to use a word like depraved, you should really pair it with something particularly unique and descriptive that isn't immediately kind of evoked by the associations of depraved, and dark definitely is. And I think it feels maybe not lazy, but kind of vague and unrealized because it too easily goes with depraved without really adding much detail. I mean, quite literally, given that it's dark. And then I think I like this acceleration. I think parts of it are convincing. You know, that urge to smoke, chase chicks in bars. Yeah, chicks is a bit outdated. You know, get something better with that. Get blackout drunk, then drive your car. Fine. Inject some drugs into your arm. No one says that. Like, I feel, you know, I feel like the author has not injected any drugs. Like, no one's being like, oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna inject some drugs into my arm.
That's
Oh,
like
that feels great.
that's what the undercover cop says to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like, oh, give me some heroin. I'm gonna inject that into my arm. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, I don't know. Like, there's many. You can research the slang. I mean, you just say take a hit. I mean,
But yeah, I mean,
even
it
that
also,
isn't very modern. But
it
you know,
also it needs, it's like as with chicks, like it's my concern is not even that it's dated. My concern is that this doesn't feel true to the voice of the speaker
yeah, yeah,
as we've come to know. But also, like I think there's some trouble establishing what exactly that voice is.
yeah. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
then one
honestly,
little slip. That's how it starts. You'll wind up at the Hotel Barth. I mean, it's a tidy ending, but it feels like it is it's the most pat assessment of what's happened that we've yet encountered, and it feels very much like something your mom tells you when you're 12, and we don't seem to get any further than that. Like that's the moment that really felt to me like the Hotel California or the House of the Rising Sun.
right.
And
Yeah,
it
and I
doesn't
think
feel I don't feel the risk that is present for the speaker or for myself, right, in reading this.
I think it's also not helped by the kind of uncertainty over the half rhyme or full rhyme of Bath
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
slash Bart. All
But
right,
again, and that
it
just like
starts in
pounds
Bath.
at us throughout the whole poem. That it just, yeah,
Yeah,
like,
I think there's some kind of repetitive structure being set up, but I
yeah,
think honestly,
yeah,
just to kill it. You know, I don't think you need it, and I think it's getting in the way
yeah,
variously,
yeah,
as here demonstrates.
yeah. But I think that's most of my
Yeah, I think so.
notes.
I think also there's the problematic element that it seems like it's turning, right. It's suddenly imagining you know, these lives serving as a demonstration of when you sort of give in and say fuck it. And at the end, it suddenly seems to turn again back into this kind of didactic comment. Don't slip whatsoever, because
Yeah,
that's how it starts. And I guess like it almost feels kind of like a betrayal to that sudden turn in rhetoric, because that sudden turn in rhetoric felt more empathetic, more felicitous
yeah.
to those individuals at the Hotel Bath, and then it's just made up into a kind of neat bow of a didactic moral lesson,
Yeah.
and we all have
One little
didactic.
slip, that's how it starts. You'll wind up at the Hotel Bar. It feels like you're back to being an indifferent passerby
Exactly. Yeah.
who
Yeah.
just says
Yeah.
like, oh well, we learned our lesson from looking, don't want to wind up like those guys.
Yeah.
And I think there's a moment earlier where it felt like, oh no, you really could wind up like those guys.
Yeah.
Like those guys, that is, mon semblable, mon frère.
Don't inject drugs into your funny bone.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely don't do that. But yeah, I mean, I think like how and when and if this is at all, there is humor here, or there is irony here, or again, like, I think this is a good poem to apply the guy making the jerk off gesture at the poetry reading test to, right?
Yeah.
Like, are there moments where it would be easy for people to scoff or smirk
Yeah.
at this poem where you don't want that to be happening? Because I think there is a real problem with just control of tone.
one little jerk, and there it starts, and you're at the hotel
You're
bath.
you're at the hotel bar. All right.
I'm
I'll just one more time read The Hotel Barth by M. Walking forth and back from work, I daily pass the Hotel Barth. Old winos sit with vacant stares, wrapped in coats and hats and scarves, their faces marred, their livers scarred. They mumble words which no one hears, then turn and shuffle up the stairs. The smell of piss and smoke and farts is sharp around the Hotel Barth. And life's a farce. It isn't fair. Or is it? That thought is scary. As if their lives serve as a warning. Beware. You know it's there. Inside your heart, depraved and dark. That urge to smoke, chase chicks in bars, get blackout drunk, then drive your car. Inject some drugs into your arm. One little slip, that's how it starts. You'll wind up at the Hotel Barth. The other one we've got is not called Untitled, it just does not have a title right now.
Okay, so this is Untitled by Jay. I don't know. Hope resembles habit. I'm still that boy. Moody, filled with plain chant, brooding behind an eye shield. What wets the surf to elegy? My condolences. Caliban then Albion, not a cry. That too is archived. My limbs carved swift against the pine swell, mistaking the wound for a doorway, the black fire for prophets stooped in rain, rehearsing the unnameable, and watched the sea, its Cambrian litter of morphines, bruised chimeras.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like just reading with a vague sort of editor's ear, immediately upon reading this poem, my initial impression was like, oh, this person can use word. Like there's something happening here with how this person has a sense of language, has a feel for language. That it caught my attention even before I'd processed a single coherent thought about the poem. I noticed how he had some sort of instinct for language. Did you have a similar feeling, or is that, I don't know?
No, for sure. I think there's a thing that a lot of people who use, I think, meter and rhyme forget is that one can basically produce very compelling patterns of sound association throughout a poem without using even half rhyme per se, but you can have repetitive sonic patterning. And I think
Yeah,
this
yeah.
poem definitely demonstrates that the writer has an ear for that sound. I think if I were to be critical, I would say that it's certainly in its roughness and its consonantal music, in the heavy use of kind of syllables that remind me of rocks, of kind of pebbles scraping together. It's very influenced by Geoffrey Hill. And maybe, if you wanted to be very uncharitable, one might argue that a writer could only read or just obsessively read Geoffrey Hill and make something of a similar music to this based just on, an obsessive imitation of Geoffrey Hill without much sort of externality or kind of original thinking when it comes to music. And I don't think that is the case here. But I'm just saying, if you want kind of both arguments, I think this poem displays a pretty excellent and talented ability to evoke a particular linguistic landscape. That landscape
Yeah,
definitely is pretty Geoffrey Hill-ish. It's pretty
yeah, yeah.
much Hill's landscape, but it doesn't seem parody mostly in a kind of caricatured sense. It seems very skillfully done. And
Yeah,
yeah, you just read it back, you can hear all the sounds. I mean, even like Caliban, then Albion,
yeah.
it's just a
And when it
wonderful
took me,
sound
yeah,
pattern.
yeah, oh yeah, Cambrian morphemes, chimeras. And then the other one that I missed at first, but it sounds so good is that too is archived, my limbs carved.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So no, I
Yeah.
mean, I think throughout you have what wets, mooding, broody, still filled, but you also have these little little inversions, wound for a doorway, prophets stooped, rehearsing the unnameable. I fucking love. What wets the surf to elegy? I thought like that could be a question in. I know I mentioned Walcott before, but that could be a line straight out of Sea Grapes.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think part of what catches my attention when I read something like this, and that it is not in meter and rhyme, is part of it, is that I mean, I love meter and rhyme. I write basically in meter and rhyme, but when you do neat things with language in meter and rhyme, it can be beautiful. I love it. I do it all the time myself. But there is then some existing template at play, right? Even the nice things with sound that M does in the Hotel Barth. When meter and rhyme sort of gives you a guidebook to how to put sounds together pleasingly, then I love it. But there is something, I think, startling when you encounter it without such a template. And I think part of what you're saying is there actually may be a template. It's just rather than using prosody, he's using the sound of Geoffrey Hill
yeah.
as the template for producing this particular texture and pattern. But it definitely catches one's attention on reading it because it doesn't read like ordinary free verse from anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be careful because I think also you could use the sound of Geoffrey Hill and produce, pretty unoriginal writing. And I think this is more original than that. I think like he has, or whoever Jay is, they have relied on an internal sense of sound that is pretty impressive and unerring. I think it is slightly overly within Geoffrey Hill's landscape. I think it's slightly too parodic at times, but I don't want to just make out like it's simply copied from Geoffrey Hill. I think that what happens here takes more talent than for just that to happen. But yes, apart from that, I completely agree. It's a very interesting soundscape to listen to.
And this, we should say, it's broken into, on the page they're pairs of lines. They're not couplets because they're not in meter and rhyme, but they're pairs of lines with stanza breaks in between them. There are 5 pairs of lines, so it's 10 lines in all. The line breaks they're usually at somewhat intuitive moments. They're often enough at moments that seem rehearsing the stanza break. I'm still that line break. Feels slightly against the grain of the phrasing. Even moody, filled with plain chant, brooding stanza break behind an eye shield. I think brooding behind an eye shield is a striking image. Eye shield, I had to look this up, but it's the big whole face covering sheet of plastic that we got to be familiar with seeing a lot during the pandemic.
Okay.
Though I think it is used sometimes just for like safety glasses that can go over your regular glasses. But I love brooding behind an eye shield as an image, but moody, filled with plain chant, brooding, end of stanza. In a way, like the brooding is doing much less there in isolation, following up the moody than it is when proceeding behind an eye shield. The line breaks and the stanza breaks to me feel a little arbitrary in most places.
I see your point. I think, I don't know, specifically there, I see your point. I would maybe respond that I think there is some pleasure to be gained from separating brooding behind an eye shield because you have this very kind of high self-serious register. I don't know. Hope resembles habit. I'm still that boy, moody, filled with plain chant, brooding behind an eye shield. I do kind of like the segmentation that allows you to suddenly kind of unexpectedly hit that kind of moment of comedy or deflation. So I'm a bit more I can be convinced on that break.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you could argue one way or the other because I also think I'm still that boy. I'm not sure I think part of what is pleasing about this is that you have language that sounds like proverbial wisdom, language that sounds like traditional high poetic register filled with plain chant.
Yeah.
What's the surf to elegy? Caliban, then Albion, not a cry, but also this talky, unpretentious, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Even My Condolences feels sort of like a self-conscious anticlimax, right?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Sorry. The bringing together of different modes of speech is interesting and titillating, and it sounds so fucking good throughout. I do think that this is, starting to look at the line breaks, starting to look at what serves or doesn't serve the effect of the poem. This is when we get into what I think is the poem's big problem, which is what the fuck are we talking about? Like, I mean, which again, maybe that's a Geoffrey Hill thing. I mean, I definitely, I spent some time looking through some of this. The Cambrian era was 550 million years ago to 500 million years ago. Litter of morphemes, which are the smallest units of meaning, linguistic meaning. My limbs carved swift against the pine swell, which evokes images of the sea and of a ship and steering, but also what does that mean? My limbs carved swift against the pine carved swift, like they're shaped, but then they're not carved, they're not shaped swiftly against the pine swell. We seem to be at the ocean, but then is this person getting keel haul? I don't know. Caliban, then Albion. It sounds terrific, but then Albion is the kind of poetic ancient term for Great Britain, and it maybe refers to the whiteness of the cliffs of Dover. Caliban is probably a corruption of cannibal, and it's the character from The Tempest, which was maybe influenced by Montaigne's essay on the cannibals. So Caliban, then Albion, not a cry. I can make guesses at what parts of it mean. What Wets the Surf to Elegy is so fucking beautiful, and it again, maybe it's just because Walcott, and then Elijah sent me a poem by somebody where he found that Walcott stole that image of the waves that are dactylic hexameter, that's stolen from some other
Oh, yeah.
earlier poet.
No,
But again,
Delmore Schwartz, is it?
no, it wasn't Delmore Schwartz, I don't think.
Okay.
Unless I'm
Yeah, I
wrong, I
vaguely
don't think it
remember
was.
this.
Yeah,
I
but
vaguely
I
remember.
think it was in the WhatsApp thread.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I love the idea of the ocean being a kind of poem, and there being something that brings the surf, makes the ocean keen and mournful and poignant, sharpened to the point of
Mm.
needing to cry out in mourning for something. I love the image of somebody brooding behind an eye shield. For somebody to be filled with plain chant, I could take some guesses. Hope resembles habit. Sounds so fucking good. It probably makes more sense if it were habit resembles hope, but I don't. I just it doesn't. It's not just that it's hard to follow. It's that fragment after fragment after fragment, line after line after line, it seems not to give me any. It seems to have no interest in my being able to follow it. And so I'm sort of allowed either to just enjoy the language as just language, which I do, or maybe go down a very lengthy rabbit chase trying to find whether maybe all of this somehow makes a Hillian kind of obscure etymological sense if I could track the references deeply enough. And I find that extremely frustrating. I don't know, you tell me.
No, I think the audience will be expecting me to sort of violently disagree with you, but actually, I basically agree in that I want to pick my words carefully because I don't want to be too critical. But I think like this poem is clearly written by someone who has great verbal talent for sound.
Yeah.
And I think also a talent for sound, a talent to use sound to make sense, not pure paraphrasable conceptual sense. But I think I basically understand the kind of morose elegy this poem makes. I like the kind of historical chaos summed up with Cambrian to Albion. I can vaguely see it what this poem's getting at, but I think a lot of what this poem's doing is just basically a parody of Geoffrey Hill. Like
I don't
in
know
all
how
honesty,
well enough to say, but yeah, I can.
in all honesty, like Geoffrey Hill's latest sequences are kind of with, someone with the kind of verbal dexterity of Shakespeare started trying to write like, Frank O'Hara, but was, in the academy. That's kind of what Geoffrey Hill's kind of later poems are like. They're like this incredibly beautiful mind moving through history at like, at the speed of reference. And some of it doesn't work because it's too self-indulgent, and some of it does work because it makes this kind of beautiful mosaic musical symphony out of these various historical figures and historical references that come together that make this kind of song about a certain aspect of suffering. But I think I think this poem gets by making kind of Hillian gestures, gestures at being um unsatisfied by the age, being full of brooding but full of plain chant, moody, bit behind kind of like a modern archetypical object. The poem, it's not just that like its linguistic system is very adopted from Hills, it's also that like its basic system of thinking is taken from Hills. It wants to seem like a curmudgeon who is also self-conscious enough to demonstrate where they come from the age, and wants to make very swift references that make beautiful musical sense to talk about the nature of England. Hill is always talking about Albion in some form or other, and there's this very kind of crystalline historical attention. But I think the problem is this all feels to me like someone rehearsing what Hill is doing, and it doesn't come together because it's just this little lyric mainly composed out of gestures taken from Hill when he was writing in massive sequences that combine a lot of things together to produce something much longer, and in that sense much more sort of communicable and much more sort of hospitable. And I think this poem is beautiful. I'm not sure it's really saying anything new. I'm not really sure it's really giving me a particularly moving
Or saying
impact.
anything at all. I don't know. I don't
Like
know. I don't
you know
know.
I think I think it's putting me through certain emotional gestures.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it's giving me any new insight into the world. Like I don't like I want to be careful here because I don't want to seem patronizing. But, when I was 17, I sent this poem off to an editor. I think it was called like Reading Walcott in a Storm. And it was this like, very lively description of reading Walcott, Derek Walcott, while the storm comes and, ranges over England, and it made these, big prophetic comments. And the editor saying it back to me was like, this is, it's very beautiful, but it doesn't say anything new. It doesn't give me any new insight into the world that I can have gone from reading Walcott. And I feel kind of the same with this. I'm like, well, yeah, this is very beautiful. It doesn't really tell me anything new about reality. It doesn't tell me anything new about human experience, about the world. It shows me that like this is written by someone with immense, verbal talent. Much,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
offense, but much greater verbal talent than most of the new formalists, in all honesty.
Yeah. No, I
But
mean, that's like, again, that's why I sat up and took note when I read it.
yeah, but right, but and I don't want to, I'm being careful because I don't want to dissatisfy. I don't want to sort of make this person turn away from poetry or seem too cruel. But in the same sense, I'm yet to see something new come out of this poem, and I think this poet has all the sort of verbal equipment to do that. But I think literal morphemes is too ostentatious. You're trying to come at this kind of idea that the sea is this sort of deconstructed linguistic operation that is sort of sending us a litter of like the basic units of language. I think it's not a particularly original idea. I mean, Walcott does it more beautifully and more directly. And also, I don't know if the sea really is a litter of morphemes. It's not what the waves seem to me. Bruised chimeras seems very beautiful and very true to what the waves are. Um,
But also, it seems like that's what the particles of language are. That there's, chimera is such a rich word because it's
exactly.
both
Yeah, yeah.
mixture and monster and fantasy.
Yeah, well, you don't need them. You don't need morphemes with chimeras. But yeah, I think this poem is it's linguistically very beautiful. I think it tells us very little new about the world. So yeah, I think it's written by someone who I think has a very everything I can say sounds patronizing, but it's written by someone with a very promising vocation before them if they want to take that up, which
Yeah.
may or may not prove very damaging to their social life, but whatever. That's a very,
We're
promising.
not saying that writing poetry and committing yourself to that is going to make your life or you or anything around you better. It probably will have the opposite effect, but
Yeah, indeed.
it would, but, but you could be really good at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
probably like it,
Yeah. I mean, so let me, in a way, I want to like nudge this poet in the same direction by giving him opposite advice.
Uh-huh.
So, because I was just looking again at this little passage that I think just kills me, mistaking the wound for a doorway, the black fire for prophets stooped in rain, rehearsing the unnameable. And it is so evocative, it's so surprising, it sounds so strange and beautiful and sinister, and it has a weight of a convincing confidence and authority to it. But my argument is, I think, so like the reason Hotel Barth seems to get into trouble is that what it is generally arguing and saying is pretty clear. It pretty much announces to us what it is after, what its
Uh-huh.
themes are, what its argument is, what its point of view is. And it doesn't always frame that gracefully. Its language gets trips up over itself sometimes. Its execution does not feel deft, and I think because it makes clear what it's going after, it is much easier to embarrass yourself with a poem like that. With a poem like this one, the untitled one, it's very hard to embarrass yourself
Yeah.
because we know what M is writing about, right? We know
Yeah.
exactly what he's writing about, and so if we think differently or we think he hasn't captured it or his take is a little skewed, we're in a perfect position to judge him, right? We have no fucking clue. We might know that some of the things that Jay is gesturing vaguely toward, but maybe this is a breakup poem, right? Maybe this is a leaving home poem. Maybe this is a coming back home poem. Maybe this is a lost my job poem. I don't know. And it's impossible for him to embarrass himself because he has very deftly concealed any of the possible meaning behind the poem. Again, I don't think it's as simple as form and content as these two separate categories, but this could be about anything. And because we're not permitted to follow it, we're left not being able to do anything but sort of wonder at some tantalizing possibilities. My case is that kind of construction, or a passage like that, mistaking the wound for a doorway, the black fire for prophets stooped in rain, rehearsing the unnameable. My argument is that is not better for being mysterious. I think that
Yeah.
if we actually were able, at least sort of, to follow what that was getting at, I think it would be more potent. And I think in this, side by side, you are more likely to, somebody is going to smirk at the Hotel Barth because of its flaws. I don't know that anybody will smirk at the untitled poem because of its flaws, right? It is much harder to embarrass yourself with a poem like this. But I think that both of these poems in their current state will ultimately be forgettable, right? So
Yeah, no,
my
I
my
agree. I
my
agree.
suggestion, and I think honestly this might lead you to the very same place as Cameron's suggestion, but my suggestion is actually don't try to be new, don't try to give us something new. Try to get at try to get at one of the things that we all already do care about and do know. Barth, Hotel Barth is not addressing a fundamentally new thought or a fundamentally new problem. It's addressing very, very, very old problems, but they continue to be problems because we are still human beings. And I think that in a way, what I want Jay to do is you've got some interesting flavor, some interesting wrinkles, some interesting style here. Now try to take all of this style and tell the truth with it. Touch something naked with it. Reveal something with it. It doesn't need to be brand new. It can be a very old truth. But if you were to tell us or to show us or to evoke for us as deftly as you do here something that we recognized, then all of your skill with language would make it all the more powerful rather than being what it is right now, which is a fascinating bauble that might, I mean, I would say like on balance, more likely to get out of the slush pile than Hotel Barth, unquestionably. Untitled, I think Untitled is 10 times more likely to get plucked out of a slush pile. But again, I don't think that either one as they currently stand actually has staying power. It's just that Hotel Barth is wearing all of its intentions on its sleeve, and Untitled is keeping them all tightly buttoned in its vest.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think, again, maybe speaking autobiographically too much, but for me, one of the most interesting lessons was learning that having, the capacity to be, effluvient or just, linguistically erupt, having that capacity is also sort of a lesson in learning when to restrain that capacity and just to be blunt, almost to the point of prosaicness. Yeah. And like that's a holding pattern that I can't give a particular formula for because it's different for every single poem, let alone every single poet. But I think there is this capacity to hide behind this very dense, very beautifully jeweled, but very beautifully indirect description of an emotion. And, I think ultimately these poets, they have this talent, they have this talent for description. And I think if they're anything like me, then ultimately that talent will eventually, it can't help but assert itself. You can't help but eventually, write a phrase that isn't plain because it's always attempting to like express itself through some kind of comparison. But if you sort of take that ability as a given or as a sort of pre-programmed thing that's going to, force itself into existence and attempt to turn to a description of the object, psychological, physical, conceptual, whatever, then I don't know, I think often, especially sort of in the latter period of time later on, it has served me very well to ignore a kind of conscious expression of talent and to trust that that kind of expressiveness is gonna assert itself at some point. Because I think describing, pinning down this kind of the unnameable, the unknowable is not just a thing of kind of Baroque description. It's basically most psychological positions because they reach beyond themselves into a state of human interaction that is subconscious, is buried in the mind. And language is always going to operate at its extremes if you want to capture that. So, I think turning away from like an intentional avant-garde perspective on linguistic arrangement and towards this attempt to grapple with the sort of the feeling, the expression of the emotion is not gonna particularly, downgrade or disservice someone like Jay, who clearly has enough talent operating beneath the surface for that to happen anyway.
Yeah, I mean, operating right at the surface.
right, but like operating without thought is what I mean, right? Operating.
Yeah. I mean, so like I don't know if this is the case because I don't know. I know nothing, truly nothing about Jay except he subscribes to the Secret Show. But my suspicion is that Jay reads poets, admires these poets. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Jay is writing in real isolation and doesn't have poets that he corresponds with. Maybe he does. If so, you probably have at least one or two poet friends who recognize that you are quite talented and that you do have something interesting happening here. I would be very surprised if it were not the case that you have plenty of people in your life, Jay, who are perfectly smart, may or may not be educated, but they can't make heads or tails of your poems. They're not maybe poetry people, or they're not your kind of poetry people. And when they see your poems, they sort of say like, wow, yeah, man. Or maybe you never show them your poems. Maybe you say like, well, it's not worth it. Why bother? They wouldn't get it. And you're probably right that they wouldn't get it. Also, like, I only, like, I get it only so far as I can say, like, you got some real ability here. My challenge to you is to think of not like the people you're hostile to or the people who hate you or the people who don't care about you at all, but think about the people in your life who care about you, who are your friends or your family. They do like you, But they're totally unequipped to grapple with this stuff. And they would maybe be polite, maybe just dismiss it, maybe not even try if you handed them something like this. My challenge to you is write something that would make them cry. And do it with all of your talent, all of your verbal ability, all of your flair, all of your style. But write something that friend or that family member who cares about you but totally doesn't get your poetry, make that person cry. And I will be very surprised, given what you've displayed here, if you don't do it in a way that is fundamentally interesting, despite, and I would say maybe even because, it is actually clear.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I like about that is as a challenge, I don't think that is an aesthetic prescription for how to write in general, right? Like that's just a prescription to demonstrate to an individual how, they can work against their talents to demonstrate something inherent within them. And I think that's what's valuable about this. We're not telling you to write like this all the time.
Yeah.
But the fact that
if you've got friends that you love doing this with, keep doing that. That's great. That's great to have.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, I will just read Untitled through one more time. This is by Jay. I don't know. Hope resembles habit. I'm still that boy. Moody, filled with plain chant, brooding behind an eye shield. What whets the surf to elegy? My condolences. Caliban, then Albion, not a cry. That too is archived. My limbs carved, swift against the pine swell. Mistaking the wound for a doorway. The black fire for prophets stooped in rain. Rehearsing the unnameable, and watching the sea. Its Cambrian litter of morphemes, bruised chimeras. That was the latest installment of Listener Crit. On the Secret Show, Cameron and I, as I said, talked about what a writer does and doesn't owe to the society he lives in. And maybe what are the ethical standards that bind him that might not bind everybody else. You can hear that at SLEERICKETS.substack.com. Put your email address in and I will give you a week's access for free. After that, it's really fucking cheap. You can also, if you'd like, sign up to be a Motherfucker of the Arts, a founding member. You give a little extra every month and it makes a big difference. If you would really love to listen but you can't afford it, write me a note at sleerickets@gmail.com and I will hook you up. And if you would just like to offer a donation, large, small, any donation is very much appreciated. I won't put that in the passive voice. We very much appreciate any donation. They are not tax deductible because unlike Tar River Poetry, we are not a nonprofit, but we will be very grateful for them. Go to SLEERICKETS.com to the upper right-hand corner and click Chip In, or just go to the website on your phone. Go to the website, SLEERICKETS.com, and at the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a button that says Chip In. You can click that, or if you are on your phone, click the X and the Chip In button will appear a little further down the menu. That will take you to a website where you can just donate directly. Very easy to do, one time, not tax deductible, but deeply, deeply appreciated. And if you would like, you can do it anonymously, or you can give your name, and we will be very thankful. I think that's all I got for you. Thank you all for listening, and with any luck, I will be speaking to you again very soon. Until then.